I declare war. Uncle Allen West did an interview on a Fox News program. And during this interview, he went on an anti-Muslim rant. So I'm going to show you this interview and then I'm going to provide my commentary on the other side.
Well, when you head into the voting booth, what do you see on the ballot? Democrat, Republican, Muslim Brotherhood? We are one step closer to that reality, according to our next guest.
Yes, say what? Our next guest says radical Islamists are busy building a voting bloc to sneak their political agenda into the American system. Their goal, to wage jihad from within. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Allen West is a Fox News contributor, joins us today from beautiful Boynton Beach, Florida. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. How are you doing, Steve and Elizabeth?
We're doing okay now until we're going to find out about what you're suggesting is going on in American politics. Tell us about this.
Well, you have the formulation of the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, and it's very disconcerting because back in 1991, there was a document that was written, and it was called the Explanatory Memorandum for the Strategic Goal of the Group or the Brotherhood in North America. And during an FBI raid in 2007 in Northern Virginia, this document was uncovered, translated into English, and we come to find out it's the blueprint, the campaign strategy for the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States of America. And the groups that are forming this new Council of Muslim Organizations like CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations, Muslim American Society, Islamic Society of North America, all of them have ties back to the Muslim Brotherhood. As a matter of fact, CARE is an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist funding case, the Holy Land Foundation case in the United States of America. And recently CARE has gone out and protested against a documentary like the Honor Diaries being shown, and campaigned heavily against Ayaan Hirsi Ali at Brandeis University to get that honorary degree. But now they're forming some type of political party, a voting bloc, as they call it. In
this country.
The institutionalized party. That's right, the institutionalized policies that favor them.
Right, and one of them actually had a statement on bin Laden, calling him a visionary. They said he was a visionary who believed in the possibility of an Islamic state in Afghanistan, the possibility that this thing might someday be. There was nothing wrong with that dream, even if it differs from that one that all Americans have here for themselves. Certainly disconcerting. You write in a piece, too, that this is a method to destroy from within. This is not a new philosophy. It has been going on and is in process.
Yeah, well, that's what the strategic memorandum says, that they would destroy America from within using a civilizational jihad, and that's exactly what you see happening. As a matter of fact, the chairman of this new Council for Muslim Organizations, Qassam Jamal, is tied back to the infamous Bridgeview Mosque in Chicago, which once hosted the spiritual mentor of Osama bin Laden. So all of these things are happening right under our nose, and for whatever reason, we have politicians that don't want to confront and don't want to combat this issue.
It's interesting. Something that an issue over the last couple of years have been it seemed like it was successful here in New York City, the Muslim surveillance program. Well, the new mayor, new police commissioner here in New York City, despite the fact that New York City is the top terror target in the world, they've discontinued the program because it just isn't PC, Colonel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is another example of political correctness trumping security. And God only hope and pray that nothing does come, of this. Because just imagine if we had a unit such as this in Boston, maybe we would have been able to find out about the Tsarnaev brothers and some of the heinous things that they were saying that really even caused members of the mosque to outcast them. But, when we once again start to go down this path of where tolerance becomes a one-way street, it leads to cultural suicide. And I was listening to the police officer and the Brooklyn, mayor last night.
Right.
And that type of relativism is truly ill-conceived, and it's very blinding to the truth.
Right. You speak of Mayor de Blasio. This is what he said in terms of handcuffing the ability to use surveillance. He said this reform is a critical step forward in easing tensions between the police and communities they serve so that our cops and our citizens can help one another go after the real bad guys. Will this fail?
Well, one of the concerns, Yeah, you even had Muhammad Atta, as we know, was living down here in South Florida, and he bought his tickets down in Lauderdale by the Sea. So we cannot afford gaps for which we can be exploited.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West joining us today from Boynton Beach. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and happy Easter.
Right back at you. And we'll be back in.
Okay, you saw his interview. It's important for people to understand the First Amendment. Yes, Uncle Alan West has his right to speak, as do I. But let me read from the First Amendment, and then we'll continue our discussion. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So we all have a right in this country to practice the religion of our choice. This is not a quote-unquote Christian country. It is not a quote-unquote Jewish country. We live in a secular society that grants all people the right to practice their religions. And all people includes Muslim people. Most Muslims condemn terrorism. Muslims around the world and Muslims in America condemn terrorism. The three organizations that Alan West mentioned in his interview, all of those are nonviolent, mainstream organizations that condemn terrorism. And he knows this. But instead of focusing on reality, he decided to invoke fear and hatred. If he was talking about any other religious group, people would be up in arms. If he made similar statements about Jews or similar statements about Catholics or similar statements about Protestants or any other group, he would be widely condemned. But in America, it is acceptable to hate Muslims. And, you know, it's equivalent. This kind of anti-Muslim sentiment is equivalent to anti-Semitism. There's no difference. It's no different from any other form of bigotry. And it has to be condemned and challenged. And it's important for African Americans to understand that there are many prominent African American Muslims in this country. And I'm just going to cite a couple of them. You know, some that we are very familiar with, people like Minister Farrakhan, people like Muhammad Ali, people like Mos Def, people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and many others. And many Africans, when we came to this country during slavery, many of us were Muslim. And there's a large segment of the Muslim population here in America that is African American. So these sweeping statements about Muslims do affect African Americans. And it's unfortunate that people fan the flames of hatred and, you know, make all these wild accusations. Under the First Amendment, all people have the right to petition their government. All people have the right to politically organize and mobilize in America. They have the right to lobby government to make sure that government addresses their grievances. And just as Jews have the right to lobby for Israel, just as religious Christians have the right to lobby against abortion and other, you know, lobby in favor of other issues that concern them, Muslims have a right under the Constitution to lobby to protect their interests as well. So, you know, for this man to get up on here on television and coon and tap dance for, you know, a white conservative audience, that's a disgrace. You know, and we should condemn all forms of bigotry. We have to understand that most Muslims condemn terrorism. You know, the way the media is set up, they want to portray all Muslims as terrorists. You know, they want to associate Muslims with violence and destruction. But most Muslims condemn that. Most of us condemn it. So I just wanted to share a couple of my thoughts about, Alan West's shameful interview, his fear mongering. This type of demagoguery has to be condemned. And that's what I'm doing tonight. I condemn it. Okay, so in this part, before I go, I just want to talk about the last segment of that interview where they went into the whole issue of surveillance, and they talked about how Mayor de Blasio is going to end the broad surveillance of Muslim communities in New York. Now, in their interview on Fox News, they were basically suggesting that by him ending that surveillance program, that it would put the people at risk in New York City. But it's important to point out, as stated in this article, this posted on MSNBC's website, it talks about how despite all that surveillance, they didn't uncover any criminal behavior. Their investigations did not lead to a single terrorism investigation. And, that's important. I mean, it's like all these people's rights were violated. They were under surveillance, at their house of worship. And nothing resulted from that. The only thing that resulted from such surveillance is a lack of trust for law enforcement. When law enforcement tramples on your rights, it's hard to trust them. And when communities can't trust the police, it makes everyone less safe. Because if people were able to trust the police, they would go to the police and report people who advocated terrorism. So they're making the community less safe by, heavily surveilling and monitoring these communities and violating their civil liberties and rights. So I'm glad that this mayor, is making a step in the right direction. No one is saying that law enforcement should not have some kind of ability to investigate terrorism. It just shouldn't be done in a way that violates a whole community's rights. Done in such a way that it violates the whole community's rights just based on their religion. So, this whole notion that America's going to be less safe or New York City is going to be less safe once they get rid of this massive surveillance just doesn't hold up, just based on the evidence that's been presented, based on the fact that, all of this surveillance didn't result in any kind of investigation for terrorism. So I just wanted to end on that note. It's just important that we not trample on people's rights. Today it's the Muslims. Tomorrow it could be your particular group. Whatever group that is. It could be Jews or Catholics or Protestants. It could be African Americans. It could be any other group. So it's important to speak out now before your group becomes the next group that's targeted by the government. Peace.